Equipment items are among the most overlooked tools in Elden Ring, and I wanted to challenge myself and beat the game using only consumable and craftable items. Am I crazy? Yes. Yes, I am. After thinking for a while trying to come up with a fitting character for this challenge, the Green Goblin seemed like the best fit. Throughout the challenge, I will be using only equipment items with a focus on throwing pots to deal damage to both enemies and bosses. So the rules for this run were, I needed to defeat all of the Shardbearer bosses, I could only use equipment items to deal damage, so anything that fits into this slot and is a consumable or a craftable item, I was allowed to use it. To make the run just a little bit spicier, I will not be allowed to level up my health, but I will be able to use talismans that increase that stat. And finally, I could not use any summons. So with the quick intro out of the way,
let's get to it. We have a new world to conquer.
Starting out, I did my usual chores, like grabbing the Physic Flask, the Dectus Medallion, the Radagon Source Seal, and after that, I went ahead and grabbed Flame Grant Me Strength, the Faith Tier, and started collecting the cracked pots. Overall, there are 20 pots to use, with 16 being available right from the get-go. I was able to collect the available pots.
I like it, Kudji.
Which for the majority of the run I will be using to craft the volcano pots, which are without a doubt the best pots for pretty much any build for a multitude of reasons. They are cheap to craft, don't require a lot of resource grinding, and most importantly, they deal a solid amount of damage. But besides the volcano pots, I will also be in need of other damage types, as different bosses have different resistances. So the cookbooks that I needed to collect were the Missionaries Cookbook 1 for Holy Water pots, the Ancient Dragons Cookbook 2 for Lightning pots, the Nomadic Warriors Cookbook 4 for Fetid pots, the Glintstone Craftsman Cookbook 4 for Magic pots, the Nomadic Warriors Cookbook 17 for Oil pots, and the Fever's Cookbook 1 for Sleep pots. Time for the resource grind, and more specifically, the volcanic stone grind. And this particular spot is the perfect one for that. There's usually about 30 to 35 volcanic stones that you can grab from here, and a few minutes of grinding can yield a great amount of this resource. By the end of the run, I did spend more time in this spot than I would like to admit though. After grabbing all of the resources, I headed out to grab the Golden Vow incantation, since it wasn't terribly far away, got a small loan of 45,000 runes for the Knight's Cavalry.
Hi, I'm Willem Dafoe.
Which I would need to use both the Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. I would also need another source of buffs, which I will talk about later, and the Bloody Slash Ash of War would help me out with that. Okay, time for Margit, which I was quite excited about. I forgot to buy the Sacred Seal, hold up. Now it's time for Margit, which as I said I was quite excited about, since I've never really given that much attention to craftable items in this game, but this initial encounter gave me a lot of hope for how this run would turn out. The volcano pots are best used against bosses that don't move around too much, and while Margit/Morgoth aren't exactly the best examples of that, they do still have some attacks that leave them open to being dealt damage to by the pots. With that said, after the first attempt, Margit went down, and I was happy to progress further. But first, I needed to grab a few resources to get a second talisman, since I now had a new slot available. And to get it, I needed to deal with this death bird right here, which was like a walk in the park. With it dead, it drops the red feathered branch sword, and to help activate its effect, I would use the Bloody Slash Ash of War before every boss fight. Before moving over to Godric, I also grabbed 2 more pots that were available in Stormvale Castle, and began the boss fight. I don't have too much to say about this guy besides him being an absolute wimp, so I'll just let you enjoy watching him get sizzled to death. After being done with Godric, I went over to this tree avatar to grab this specific physic tier, and the volcano pot impressed me once again. I mean, I still got the stuff, so With that done, I grabbed the third talisman that I will be using once I have an available slot, grabbed another cracked pot from the Academy of Raya Lucaria.
You can't do this to me.
You know how much I sacrificed?
And moved on to... Psych, you thought I would fight Renala, didn't you? Nah, that stuff is for the weak, man. I wanted to show General Radahn who the real boss is. After that epic fight, I decided to help a poor lady in need, held her hand, and got transported to the Volcano Manor, where Patches would later end up. I completed his quest up until he appeared in the manor, where he would sell you an infinite amount of fan daggers, and this merchant right here is kind enough to sell you an infinite amount of kukris, which is very nice of him. Anyway, I progressed further to the capital, where I was barely able to defeat the tree sentinel guarding it. Got the last cracked pot that I needed. Moved on over to the spectral aspect of Godfrey, which is once again a superb practice run for the actual Godfrey boss fight. I then went back to Caelid to grab the strength talisman, and finally went up against Morgoth. Now, initially, I was fully expecting this guy to be a major pain in the rear for me, but in reality he was pretty generous with his attacks throughout all of the attempts. He didn't move around too much and always did punishable attacks, which is very lucky on my part. With Morgoth defeated, I now had the mountaintops to explore, but before that, I grabbed the Armorer's Cookbook 7 for the Giant's Flame pots, which is another easy to craft and highly effective pot that I could use. This spot right here is a great place to grind for the required resources for that pot. Now, the Fire Giant was quite a headache for me to deal with. The pots were never gonna be the main damage source in this fight, as they just don't do much damage against him. Rather, they would be a last resort type of deal. The fan daggers and the kukris, however, are superb tools against this guy. Doesn't mean that he went down quickly though. Oh no. The winning attempt took me about 9 to 10 minutes to go through, and at the end of it, I had next to no resources left. This run was the first time that I was legally allowed to use the sleep pots without my conscience nagging on me, which was refreshing. The plan for taking these guys out wasn't too dissimilar from how I usually approach them. Put them both to sleep at the start and start wailing away at the noble, focusing on him throughout the fight. Once the apostle wakes up, it's best to just wait until he starts to summon help before throwing a sleep pot at him, and after that, I just needed to repeat the cycle until both of them would go down. With the Godskins put to rest until my next run, I completed Alexander's questline and subsequently Jarbaron's questline, which allowed me to get the companion Jar Talisman. Pretty underwhelming how you only get it pretty much at the end of the game, but oh well. Later on, I found this merchant right here who sells the poison chunks, which would come in handy against Malekith. In his first phase, he is very much prone to standing in one spot, which is great for me, and not so great for him. Phase 2, on the other hand, is a different beast altogether. Literally. The best bet was to use the Giant's Flame pots for a quick burst of damage instead of the slower damage buildup of the Volcano pots, because this guy just doesn't want to stay in one spot. Like, ever.
You fought well.
Why are you gay?
Now, I wasn't expecting Gideon to be as much of a nuisance as he ended up being. I have never once throughout 1,000 hours of playing this game raged this hard at losing to a boss. Most of these losses were so tragic that I literally wanted to cry. It is quite clear that this guy decided to take revenge on me for abusing him in so many ways during my other runs, which is, I guess, fair? But with enough patience, Gideon finally went down.
What is Willem Dafoe like in real life? You're looking at him, baby!
Oh, and I also defeated Renala, since respecking would be quite necessary in the endgame, and went up against Godfrey. I don't have much to say about this one. He was really fun to fight. Phase 1 was a breeze in most cases. It's the Phase 2 that I was worried about, because of how aggressive Hoaraloo is. Throwing a pot takes quite a decent amount of time, and Hoaraloo is just unrelenting, so exploiting his windows of attack would be quite difficult. With Godfrey defeated, I fought this particular tree avatar to get the damage negation tier, and yeah, well, at least I got the stuff. I also needed to gain access to the Halic Tree and Moglin Palace, so I ended up fighting Nile to get the secret medallion, went over to the farming spot and got the Halic Drake Talisman plus 2, which I would use a bit later. I also got the Lightning Scorpion Charm, the Pearl Drake Talisman plus 2, defeated Gillica to get the Ritual Sword Talisman, acquired the Ancient Dragon's Apostle Cookbook 4 to get access to the Ancient Dragon Bolt pots, and finally got the Howl of Shabriri incantation. All of that preparation was for Moog, for whom I would need to change up my strategy quite a bit. He is super resistant to fire, so volcano pots and giant flame pots were out of the question. What he's least resistant to is magic and lightning damage types, and the easiest to craft cracked pots for that is the magic pot. So for his phase 1 I would bombard him with magic pots, also proccing frostbite for the extra little bit of damage, and as soon as he started his second phase transition, I would try my hardest to proc bleed at least twice on him to feel a little safer, and to finish him off, I would use the Dragon Bolt pots. They are a lot harder to craft, so I would use them only when I felt confident in doing so. And after what felt like an eternity, Moog finally went down, and I gotta say, I was super proud of being able to defeat him like that. And after that, I decided to try my luck against Rykard, and it didn't really work out too well. I tried out a few strats on him, the main one being stacking status effects like Poison and Rot, and while it was quite successful, I would need a bit more health to be able to beat him like that. So Serpent Hunter it is.
Don't do it to me. I beg you. No.
I was fully expecting Malenium to be the bane of my existence during this run, which wasn't the case. She was a lot easier to deal with than Moog, surprisingly. And it all came down to the fact that the volcano pots leave pools of lava no matter where you throw them. So throwing them in front of me, prompting Malenia to come take a closer look, just to get cooked up, was a great and easy to pull off strat. Phase 2 was even more simple than that. Since Malenia is least resistant to fire, Giant's Flame Pots would just melt her while she was stuck doing her Scarlet Ione attack. And to get her to do it again, just simply exploiting some of the moves that will prevent her from dodging would help me take her down with just equipment items only. Which is something I never imagined I would do. Like, for real.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Radogan is yet another boss that is weak to power-based attacks, evident by this clip. Once the Elden Beast phase rolled around, I would fully heal up, change the Red Feathered Branch Sword to the Hailing Drake Talisman +2, and reapply all of the buffs. Suffice it to say, I was terrified of the Elden Stars. Surviving it on just 15 health would not work, I could not break the Elden Beast stance while it was casting Elden Stars, and dodging that move completely is pretty much impossible, so I had to face tank it with the little amount of health that I had. But besides Elden Stars, there really wasn't a single move that had me worried, which allowed me to easily go through the beast and become the Elden Lord.